typically we can pass those models with deepfakes. So not only can you not tell the difference, but like computers can't tell the difference either. We saw one that's fully real time. So you could join a call like this one and, interact with the person and, wear someone else's persona. It's very difficult for a human to tell at this point that AI is generating what they're seeing or hearing. 80% of the incidents were credential-based attacks, not security vulnerabilities. Sometimes we spend so much time thinking about like technical vulnerabilities, and we don't look at the organization from a social engineering standpoint and ask where are the weaknesses. You can expect more automated, at-scale social engineering that impersonates people, that's very compelling. There's no patch for that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening to another episode of Beyond the Alert. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Tom Cross, Head of Threat Research at GetReal. Tom, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's fun to talk about this stuff.
Awesome. So let's dive right in. You have lots of insights. What is the most convincing deepfake attack you have seen, and one that almost fooled even the experts?
My job at GetReal is to investigate threats, so to try to understand, what's possible out there. And I think what's interesting in the space of deepfakes is the pace at which the technology is maturing. And so we're constantly seeing new advances in the technology. And a lot of people, I think, they experience a certain amount of future shock with respect to deepfakes. Because the technology is advancing so fast, they may have seen something, a few years ago, or they've encountered, maybe an AI generated image, and they're like, oh, those things always have 8 fingers. I'm used to, I can tell when they're not real. And they see something that's really sophisticated. They overestimate, I think, their ability to detect them. So we see a set of different categories of deepfakes, but that are incredibly compelling, like really all the time. It's easy to use face swaps to wear essentially the face of another person and to do so in a way that's very convincing to people. Also, by the way, convincing to biometrics. So we've tested, face swaps and voice changing or voice cloning software against some of the best biometric models that we can find, and typically we can pass those models with deepfakes. So not only can you not tell the difference, but like computers can't tell the difference either. And so recent developments have involved something we called full body swapping, where you can sort of marionette the AI generated person on the screen. So it's not just the face, it's like their hair and their body and their hands, and they do exactly what you do. And just a month ago in late March, we saw, so the first full body swapping tool we saw, you had to upload a video and then it would do it and download it. But in March, we saw one that's fully real time. So you could join a call like this one and, interact with the person and, wear someone else's persona and essentially have that person do all of the things that you're doing throughout the call. And it's impossible for a person to tell that they're not talking to that person.
Let's hope you didn't bring your digital twin today.
You have no idea who you're talking to here, really.
Exactly. Now that you have sufficiently scared me, I'll ask you the next question.
To be fair, I don't know if I'm talking to you either. So we're both on the same terms here.
I'd like to think I'm that skilled, but probably not. So how are threat actors using deepfakes to breach organizations? So you touched a little bit on it, right? But
Well, there's a lot of different categories of attack. And so one of the things that I like to think about is what I call the credential lifecycle. Like basically what we do in order to authenticate people is we convert this human, or hopefully it's the right human, into a cryptographic key, which they store on their cell phone. And then when they log in, they approve the MFA on their phone, and then they're in. And basically they prove that they have the cryptographic key, and we trust the cryptographic key, right? And then they can access stuff. But there's that moment where we issue it to them in the first place, or there's also this other moment when they lose their phone phishing and they call us up and, the phone is at the bottom of the lake and they've got a new phone, but they need to get a new credential, a new cryptographic key from us to get back into their network. And these moments, I think are like, for a variety of reasons, increasingly being targeted by people who are impersonating. I want to be clear. Some of them are, they're presenting their real identity under false pretenses. Some of them are using deep fakes to impersonate somebody else. And then we're also seeing agentic social engineering, where there isn't a human brain behind the thing that's talking to you on the phone. It's a LLM, and those things are increasingly sort of compelling and emotionally intelligent in how they interact with you. The key places where you're vulnerable to that are, first of all, at onboarding. So when you're employing people, so you probably heard that North Korea placed like thousands of people at hundreds of US businesses over the past few years. Often those people are not deep faking. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they use accent changers. Sometimes they change their face, but often they present their own real identity, but they're doing so under false pretenses. They're telling you they're someone else. They live somewhere else, but they're coming in through the front door. And part of the reason they're successful is because you're never meeting with them in person. So I think we all sort of learned the hard way through COVID that we can work remotely. And now, like, there's a sustained amount of about 10% of all employees of US businesses are 100% remote. They never go to an office. And so because you only interact with this person through a screen like this one, do you really know who they are? So deepfakes are used to exploit that same vulnerability. So onboarding is a key one. I think another key one is credential reset, like I was mentioning. So you call up the help desk and, I I'm this employee and I lost my phone and, I need to reset it. Can you do that for me? And I know everything about the person I'm impersonating, and I can sound like them and look like them and pass a biometric check, right? That stuff's happening. And then we're also seeing social engineering. People, so for example, the CEO of Wiz, somebody took his voice from a presentation he did publicly and cloned it, and then started calling employees of the company and trying to talk them into giving him a password, claiming it was an emergency. That's an example. That kind of stuff is going on. So just at the for most organizations, there are some, threats that are happening. If you are in finance, if you're in crypto, or you're a bank, there's this whole other set of, criminals go where the money is, right? So a lot of deep fakes are being used to bypass like KYC checking. So when you sign up for a bank account online, you got to go through, you got to show your ID and take a selfie to prove you're a person before they give you an account. I see people selling KYC validated accounts at banks and cryptocurrency exchanges for like 150, $200 a pop on dark web forums. They're making fake identities. They're getting past these checks. They're probably selling these accounts to people who are engaged in money laundering. So there's a tremendous amount of that activity happening as well.
How do you mitigate the onboarding process if somebody is a deepfake?
So the way that I like to think about the onboarding process is like a cybersecurity kill chain. I think kill chains are awesome. We had one, but these days we've got all kinds of models that kind of look like ATT and CK that apply to lots of different domains. And it's really interesting to think about how cybersecurity professionals have like built thicker and thicker models of the stuff that we do over the past 10 years. The hiring process is just such a case. There are all these steps that you go through. There's a screening, initial interviews. Maybe there's a test that you have the person take. There's the like employment verification step where they're supposed to show you that they're lawfully authorized to work. There's onboarding where you give them the computer and eventually they're working there. Maybe there's training as well, right? So there's this whole set of steps, and each one of those steps you can layer in different security controls. And like the way that most of these like DPRK fake IT workers are getting caught today is after they already have the job. They are onboarded, and basically CrowdStrike or Microsoft Defender or one of these other EDR agents is installed on their laptop. First of all, those guys are hunting for this stuff. And there's a lot of detections that they've built in that relate to this. So, for example, a lot of these guys, so what they'll do is when they get the job, maybe they've got an address associated with the identity they use to get the job. Often they steal a real person's identity to get the job. So that person checks out, the background check clears. They've got a fake ID for that person, which so they get past employment verification. And then when they're about to get the job, they call you up and say, "My mom is sick and she lives in Arizona. And so I got to go to Arizona for a few weeks. Can you just send the laptop there to her address? And I got to work from her place for a few weeks, and then it'll be back to normal again." They'll do it. They'll send the laptop to this address, this different address from the person's address, and that address is a facilitator that they've recruited, who's taking laptops from many of these people and racking them up and plugging in an IP KVM so that those computers can be remotely managed. And then these folks who are maybe they're in North Korea. We can talk about where else they are. Sometimes they're not, but they're able to remotely. They're rarely actually in the United States, but they're remotely able to get into the laptop and then log in and do their job. And so the laptop will have an EDR agent, and it might detect the presence of the IP KVM. The other thing is these guys are trying to hold down like 3 or 4 jobs at a time, which is tough. It's hard enough to hold down one job, right? So, they might be using like a mouse jiggler or some other stuff to make it like look like they're working even when they're not. And so you can detect that stuff sometimes. Those are the kinds of things that like most people are using today to detect these attacks. And we think like people should try to detect these guys earlier on in the process. I don't want them to have access to my network. Often, if they're in there, one of the things they do is they come up with an exit plan because they figure they're going to get caught and fired eventually, and they want to get as much money out of this company as they can when they're going out the door. So maybe they steal some data and they'll ransom it when you fire them. And so you don't want them on your network. And so you really want to catch them during onboarding. And or during so first of all, if somebody is trying to change their address on their day of first employment, like that should be a red flag, right? If they're constantly changing their bank account information, that's also an interesting red flag. But during the interview process, one of the things that I guess we think is that the video conferencing tool that you use to interview them remotely, that's like a surface area. So like from a security operations standpoint, there's all these like places where the internet touches my organization and I want to monitor them all, right? But a lot of people like they don't think about like their video conferencing system as being one of these surface areas where the internet is sending stuff to them, right? But these guys are, they're joining calls from particular IP addresses. Are you collecting those IPs? Are you looking at them? Do you know is the geolocation for them like reasonable for this person? They have email addresses. And of course, our view is that also the audio and video that they're sending over these calls is ones and zeros that are going into your network, and you want to monitor those as well and detect threats. So what we do is try to build deepfake detection technology. That can detect if they're using a deepfake on the call. But there's a whole variety of other things that we're looking for as well. And like, because as I said, sometimes these guys use deep fakes, sometimes they use their real face and voice as well. And either way, I want to be able to catch them.
For sure. For the average company, is somebody in the cybersecurity team equipped to understand deepfakes to the degree that you do, or is that more of a specialty and it's more rare, so therefore a bigger problem?
Well, I mean, I think I go back to like what I said before, which is so we actually did a survey, GetReal did of like 700 like IT professionals at, sort of medium to large businesses. And the thing that we got out of the survey is what we think of as overconfidence. The answers indicate that almost everyone, so a significant percentage of the people that we surveyed, have like they think that their organization has experienced a deepfake related attack. I think like 40 some percent said that they'd hired a fraudulent candidate, like, and that person had gotten through and gotten the job, and they were aware of it. But then we asked them, we started out talking about, we asked them, could you detect the deep fake? And they were like, sure, I can. And, I get, again, you can't. Like the level of sophistication of stuff that we see out there is very, very high, and it's very difficult for a human to tell at this point that AI is generating what they're seeing or hearing. And so, I think that's really the problem is like any other of the technological domain. It's moving real fast, and if you're not like paying attention to it, and who has time for that? You don't know exactly what the state of the art is. And that's sort of how people can be blindsided by it. And I think it's also evolving very quickly in terms of like the way that threat actors use it. And so I mean, threat actors typically, they find something that works and that is repeatable, and then they do it over and over again. And in my experience over the years, like the fact that a security vulnerability exists and is significant does not necessarily mean, that attacks will immediately follow it. So it just depends on the nature of the vulnerability and how it relates to like the process that attackers are following. So for example, I'm going to go back to, I don't remember what year this was, man. This might be 2008, 2009. There was this huge vulnerability in DNS that my late and good friend Dan Kaminsky discovered, where he could poison DNS servers remotely. And from a technical standpoint, it was a very significant vulnerability because you could manipulate any computer's DNS lookups. And there was a great industry coordination effort in order to like mend the vulnerability and protect people. But there was sort of this expectation, given the significance of the vulnerability, that we would see like a lot of attack activity happening that targeted it. But that did not occur. And I think part of it was, that the industry worked very diligently to address it. But also part of it was that it was just different from the kinds of things that bad guys were doing every day. They were exploiting vulnerabilities in web browsers. And if you disclosed a new vulnerability that affected, Chrome or Firefox, like those things would get picked up and used because they already sort of industrialized around that stuff, and they could take new vulnerabilities and put them into practice. Whereas this DNS attack was very different and required a completely different attack methodology, and it was harder for attackers to pivot into that business, if you will. And because so much work was done to remediate it, it wasn't valuable for them to do so. I think that with deepfakes, it's kind of similar. There's this technological capability that's out there, and there is sort of a lag with sort of attackers picking it up. As I've mentioned, there's a lot of attack activity targeting eKYC because the banks have the money, and so attackers move quickly, to start exploiting capabilities to target banks. I think that the thing that's happening right now, and we've done some experiments. I mentioned agentic sort of personas. So we've done some experiments just over the past few months with what's possible around wiring these deep fakes up to an LLM and having the LLM engage in social engineering. So this guy, Devin, who's on our team, he built this setup where he took, so you got a soft phone like Google Voice, runs in your browser, and then you can use software to route audio within your computer. There's a few different applications that let you do it, and then you can route the audio from the phone to a speech to text model. And there's lots of great ones because people want to talk to their LLMs. OpenAI has a very good speech to text model. So you wire it into that, you get the text out, then you wire the text into an LLM. And for our experiment, we used commercial systems as well as open source ones. The commercial systems kind of try to have guardrails to prevent themselves from being used for crime. So you have to deal with the guardrails. Whereas if you use stuff on your laptop, there are no guardrails, right? So you can get your laptop to do whatever you want. So wire that to an LLM. You prompt the LLM with what it's supposed to say or how it's supposed to interact. And then you wire that back to a text-to-speech generator. And they're, again, very good voice cloning text-to-speech generators. They produce high quality output. You can give them maybe a 30-second to 2-minute sample of someone's voice, and they'll sound just like that person, even the biometrics. And then you can wire the audio output from that back to your phone, and you've got an AI that can place phone calls and it's prompted to interact with the people that it's talking to. So Devin programmed his to pretend to be an IRS agent. This IRS agent is very angry with you because you're late on your taxes, and you owe the government money. And if you want to resolve this thing, what you could do is go buy some gift cards right now. And this thing is, it'll argue with you. If you tell it you think it's a scam, it will threaten to have you arrested. And I mean, it adapts to one of the things he noticed is that it would adapt to sort of his tone. Like if he was refusing or combative with it, it would get combative with him. If he was compliant and said, "Okay, I'm going to go get the gift cards," it would become much nicer to him. And again, the future shock thing I was talking about. If you don't like, so most people are used to this situation where they call like their airline and they get the dumbest AI possible that wants to answer the call and it's going to help you. And it's like, if you could help me, I wouldn't be calling. Right. And then you have to say, I want to talk to a human. Right. And it argues with you about that. And they're just super brittle. If you tell it what you want, it'll say it doesn't understand what you're talking about. Cause if it did, then you wouldn't need it. Um, they're not used to dealing with like the kinds of things that are possible, right? Like a really well prompted sort of LLM with access to resources that is it's calling you, it's interacting with you, it's pressuring you to do things.
Sounds like it has emotions. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it's responsive to your behavior. Like, people are not used to that, right? They don't expect a computer to respond to them in that way, and so, I think that there's this moment of, like, significant vulnerability that exists before our awareness of this stuff, like, catches up with the reality, and I think also that just the availability of these tools to threat actors and their ability to use them to do stuff is accelerating, right? The AI that's in the lab or very expensive today will be everywhere in 12 to 18 months. And so the speed with which this stuff is spreading is increasing. And we're seeing more and more threat actors like do this, your LLM based social engineering agent, you can scale it up. One person can be placing thousands of calls simultaneously this way, right? And, if 900 of them don't work out, they'll still make money, And so that's the thing that, like I said, I think coming back to your original question, it's like, how aware are people of this? I think the problem is it's just moving fast. And if you think you're aware of it right now, if you check back in 3 months, like it'll be significantly different than it was then. And so that's the concern that like that's how we kind of get blindsided sometimes in computer security. We're following a set of practices and we're compliant and we're on top of it, we think, and there's some blind spot, some unknown that we aren't monitoring, that we aren't thinking about, and that ends up like creating a bad day for us.
Yeah, it's probably the things that seem most obvious and simple that catch you off guard. I mean, it's a such a good point you brought up of we're all used to those call centers from airlines that just, hey, customer service, and they give you the runaround for 30 minutes, so you just can't take it, right?
Right, they're stupid. We think that the computer is stupid, and like if the computer shows up and it's not stupid, we're just not prepared for that.
Right. And I've watched videos where you can essentially, to your point, you can change the whole body of a person into AI, and I move my arm, the thing moves its arm, right? But what I didn't know before speaking with you is that it can even mimic the tone and the sentiment, which is crazy.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. A properly, like, sort of integrated, like, LLM with, sort of agentic presentation capabilities can be you can prompt it to engage in different emotional states, and it will modify its tone and disposition based on, the context and what it's been prompted to do. And so that's it can be really surprising.
Yeah, and just thinking about the application of that, right? I mean, you can have a sales development rep who hates his job and builds this out and dials on behalf of the company, but is never at his desk. You can probably have, I mean, thankfully, I don't have those concerns, but for the younger generations trying to have online dating, I mean, good luck. That is so scary.
There are some very significant, like, romance scams, when I say significant in terms of, like, the millions of dollars that they've made over the past few years, and sort of exploiting people's loneliness. And they often use deep fakes, so that there are famous cases where people thought that they were in a romantic relationship with some celebrity.
There's some Netflix series on that I've watched. It's horrible.
Right? But it is, sort of, and so these people are using face swapping software and they're calling up and, they've got that celebrity's persona. But there's also a lot of the use of deep fake technology and, in the context of romance scams, not to, impersonate a celebrity, but just to disguise the identity of the people doing this. We actually, have, looked at a tool that's called How Tien, which is a Chinese deepfake tool, and it includes in it a bunch of capabilities for retouching the deepfake. So you put the deepfake on, and then you can retouch it to make it look better and more attractive. And we suspect it may be used in these kinds of these kinds of activities. And right, there's a lot of again, hopefully, if you're dating somebody, you meet them in person.
I'm married, I don't have that problem, thankfully, but it just gives me a lot of relief knowing that, right? Because I wouldn't want to put myself out there and who knows who you're talking to.
Well, the other thing is that, maybe you are in a romantic relationship with Brad Pitt, but he probably doesn't need your money.
That's a whole nother situation.
Right. Like when the celebrity that you are in a relationship with over the internet has financial problems, you should begin to question that. It's really bad. It's really bad, some of the things that are going on there. And consumers are particularly susceptible, I think. So yeah, a lot of the attack activity is pointing at them rather than companies. But yes, because it's so new, because people don't know what's possible. They haven't experienced this stuff before. People don't realize that they could be talking to someone who looks exactly like Brad Pitt, and that could be fake. Like, they don't know that, right? And that's why that attack is successful.
Right, and that's why, I mean, if you're not really focusing on AI and the developments, you have no clue but any such thing in the first place. And then secondly, you cannot hold companies accountable as a consumer if you don't even know about the problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You may have answered this one, so tell me if you did. How sophisticated do deepfakes need to be to fool someone in a live meeting? I think you talked about all of the ways that they do fool you, but
Well, so let me talk about this specific thing. I think so there's two different attack scenarios I see for like a live meeting. The easiest thing to pull off that is most compelling is the least interactive. And that is where I go to one of these services where I give them a picture, and they will generate an AI video of that person doing whatever I want, like saying whatever I prompt it to say. You know what I'm saying? Those are very easy to produce. The quality is extremely high. You can utilize they'll leave the person in the setting that they're in. So I actually have an AI avatar of myself in this booth, that sounds like me. I've put it on calls with my coworkers before, and they think I'm talking to them for a minute. Like, it works really well.
see, I don't have a good question to test if this is really you.
Yeah, you will never know. You can, of course, one of the things you could do is ask people to do like this with their hand, where they open the hand and move it slowly across the face. And some of the face swapping software, we call it occlusion. It can't deal with that occlusion very well, and so you see errors. But if you do this, like, it'll be fine because the object that's occluding the face is solid. But that is increasingly not a problem. If I showed you, like, one of the things that they handle really well is just lighting changes. So you can have a light on your phone and move it around, and it'll deal with animating the light, changes on the face and things like that. So, they are really difficult to catch, and increasingly, it's going to get like harder and harder to do that. But anyway, so I was talking about this ejection technique where you make a video of someone, say a senior executive, and they're saying something, and then you join the call and you play the video, and they're like, "Hey, everybody, can I get your attention, please?" And if they're like a senior person, everyone's going to listen to them, and then they can give orders, and then hang up the phone, right? That sort of injection is really easy to pull off. It's very compelling, but it's not interactive. The interactive stuff. So one of the things that is a reality of this technology today is that a lot of the tools that do voice, and tools that do video are different tools, and they're not tied together. So you can make calls. So if you're not on camera, or you're talking on the phone or you're calling in, again, you could use the model I was talking about. You can have an LLM that's cloning the voice of the person. It will sound exactly like them. Or you could also do sort of direct speech to speech translation. So there's speech to speech audio cloners that will clone someone else's voice. So I can sit here and talk to you, and what you will hear sounds like someone else saying the same things. And those things work very, very well. It's very hard to detect them. If you want to show up and you are impersonating a person that these other people know, and you want to have the face and the voice, what you've got to do is make sure the video and audio are synchronized so that my lips are moving at the same time that you're hearing the sound. And you can do that. So, for example, one of the tools that people use to route video around in their computer is called OBS camera. So often people that are doing sort of deepfake video injection, they'll have a face swapping tool that'll have OBS camera that feeds the face swapping data into a camera device on their laptop, and then they'll pick that camera in the video conference call to show the video to the call. That stuff is you can tune it a little bit, so you slow down the video or you introduce a delay, and that will synchronize it with the if you're doing audio translation as well, so that the deepfake audio is lined up with your lips, and it requires a little bit of effort. And so it can definitely be pulled off, and there's great demonstrations of it out there, but it's not easy. And so that has two implications. The first is that normally when we see attacks, like video attacks are audio attacks, audio alone is much more common. Because it's really easy to call someone up and sound like somebody else. You don't have to muck with the video. And the other thing about face swapping is you kind of need to look a little bit like the person. I could put on Donald Trump's face, but my hair is different than his, and you're going to know it's not him. If you don't look a little bit like the person, it doesn't, and these body swaps will change that because, they're full body, including hair. But, so audio attacks alone are much more common. But the other implication, I think, is that I expect someone to release software that fixes this problem, because this is just a software development thing. So someone will build a tool that does the face swapping and the audio synchronization and has it all packaged for you and easy to use. We just in our research haven't encountered that tool yet, but I could easily predict that, 12 months from now, such a tool will have been released because there's no technical barrier to doing it. It's just a matter of someone, deciding that they want to.
Interesting. What should a credential reset process look like in a world where voices and faces can be faked?
This is a tough question, right? So, I think that some of the most significant some of the most significant security incidents in the past few years have occurred as a consequence of credential reset. So, everyone remembers or most people do, that the Caesars and MGM incidents from 2023. Somebody went on LinkedIn and just looked up employees of those organizations and found an employee that was a sysadmin, and therefore had sort of super admin access to the domain and things like that, and then called up the help desk, told them they were this person. They needed their credentials reset. They knew enough information about the person to convince the help desk that they were in fact the person. They weren't using deepfakes or anything. They just, were talking to a help desk person who had never met the person they were impersonating. And they got access, and they brought in a ransomware gang, and because they got access to a privileged account, they were able to get broad access inside the network once they got in. And there's a whole lot of things to think about there. So the first thing that a lot of organizations did is they just instituted callback verification for credential reset. So they'll call you back at your cell phone number. So the problem with that idea is SIM swapping. And in fact, about a year ago, Marks and Spencer is a big British retailer. Somebody targeted them in the same way, convinced their help desk that they were employees. They did the callback verification, but these folks had SIM swapped those employees' phones before they did this attack, so they were able to receive the calls. and they got in and they, launched ransomware within Marks and Spencer. So callback verification is not sufficient, and it puts us in this place where we have to ask ourselves, well, what is sufficient? And I think that there's a set of things to think about both before you reset the credential and afterwards. So, talking afterward, like in the case that we just discussed, this guy had a privileged access and he resets his credentials and then immediately starts like creating new privileged accounts. Like, so tie those. Look at your SIM correlations, right? Like if somebody does like credential reset, that should be a SIM event, and other events that happen very soon after that should get a lot of scrutiny. One of the things we see a lot is the credential reset, then they go directly to the HR system where the direct deposit stuff is configured, and they change their bank account for direct deposit. And 15 days later, a paycheck is cut. It gets cut to the wrong bank account. By the time the victim realizes they're not getting paid anymore, it's been a month, and trying to investigate that like a month later, by then the criminals are long gone. Right. So surges in change. If a bunch of different employees are all changing their direct deposit at the same time, that's super suspicious. If somebody changes their direct deposit shortly after a credential reset event, that's very suspicious. But beforehand, how are you authenticating this person? And so, I mean, my opinion is, notwithstanding using technology, like find a person, figure out who this person works with. They have a boss, they got coworkers, right? Have the process be that the help desk person has to get someone who knows this person on the phone at the same time and set up a video conference call like this one, right? Where, you can see them, you can hear them. Somebody who knows them can see them and can hear them. And then, you want to also think about checks and balances for the help desk employee. Maybe two help desk employees have to be involved in order to reset a credential so that one of them can't be talked into, sort of making a shortcut just this once, right? Because those people are potentially susceptible to pressure. And so it's bringing those kinds of things together. It's like after reset, during reset, what are the checks and balances you can put in place to verify that this person is who they say they are? And I also think that I don't want to talk my book that much, but having deepfake detection present in that call, is also helpful. So that they can't impersonate, the employee, because then they could potentially use a deepfake and maybe under the circumstances of, man, I'm just trying to get some work done, boss. They can convince the manager that the help desk person found that they are in fact the person that they are professing to be, right? So you want to bring all those elements together, and I just think as an industry, we're still nobody's doing that today. In terms of their credential reset process, we are still, as an industry, like sort of being reactive to incidents like Marks and Spencer, and trying to, oh, I'll make this little tweak to my process and hopefully that will keep me safe. And I don't think we've reached the place where there's like this really strong set of like best practices that security operations center or help desks should follow, that sort of takes this problem off the board. I was looking at Microsoft's threat report for 2025, and they said they were talking about initial access brokers and how they get initial access to networks which they resell, and 80% of the incidents were credential-based attacks, not security vulnerabilities. And so, the like access control and credentials are very much not a solved problem. And, no matter how good we get at software security, they will remain a concern.
Yeah. It's fascinating because the steps you're outlining are not that convoluted to add to the process, a pain in the neck for the person that truly needs their password reset or their credentials, right? But so somebody the other day on the podcast, a guest said, well, if you have somebody watching your house when you go on vacation, you just give all the keys to your neighbor, or do you have an extra set somewhere, right? And why are we not treating security that way?
Oh. Yeah, I mean, there are always part of the problem is that when it is an attack, whatever set of like backup or secondary things you have, that person will profess to be in the corner case circumstance where none of that stuff works, right? And so you will always have this situation. And I mean, one of the things you could sometimes do is like some of the phone companies have APIs where you can check to see if you're authorized by them to for a legitimate use case. You can check to see whether or not someone's SIM has been swapped. But if I lost my phone in the lake, my SIM has been swapped. That's the condition I'm in. So the fact that you know that that person's SIM was swapped does not necessarily give you a an indication that they are an impersonator, right? And so yeah, I mean, I think one of the I think just part of the problem is that like the help desk is there to help. They're not part of the security team. But they're tasked with this credential reset, as part of one of the things that they handle. They also handle probably other security related tasks. And sometimes we spend so much time thinking about like technical vulnerabilities, and we don't sort of like look at the organization from a social engineering standpoint and ask where are the weaknesses that we can get through that way, because it's maybe such an old idea. This is what I think is going to happen. Like, everyone's talking about Anthropic's mythos and like the way that it can find vulnerabilities and exploit them. And I think that is ultimately good for software quality. I think that we're going to have amazing tools to audit software and find vulnerabilities in them. And the stuff that's coming off the truck from software vendors is going to be a lot safer than it is today as a consequence of this technology. And so vulnerabilities, but the point is vulnerabilities are only maybe 20% of initial access methods today, right? They'll shrink down, but social engineering will remain a problem that we're going to be dealing with for the long term.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Because we're not really focusing on it. We're not aware of how we might be aware, but don't want to believe it, how quickly AI is changing everything and how easy things become to impersonate.
But also, like we just it's not a technology problem on some level, right? Like it's not a thing that like human susceptibility to social engineering is not something that technological advance will fix for us, right? Whereas technological advance may make our software better.
Good point. So, as deepfakes get cheaper and faster to generate, what does that mean for the volume of attacks?
Well, I mean, like I said, like I think I've talked about this a little bit. Like the threat actors will increasingly have access to these tools. They will be increasingly possible to run on their own computer. So some of the most compelling, like sort of emotionally adaptive LLM social engineering things that we've done with commercial tools. And those things have some guardrails. And so, in some cases, we got nasty letters from them about how what we were experimenting with violated their terms of service. You know what I mean? So, they're not ideal for threat actors. It's ideal for threat actors to run these things on their own laptop where there are no rails. They can do whatever they want. The things that you can run on your own laptop are lagging behind the state of the art stuff that some of the commercial companies have. But there's this process happening where that lag, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 12 months, but eventually this stuff ends up, in open source models that you can run on your computer. Our computers are getting faster and more powerful all the time. And so our ability to generate, to use AI to generate things, with our own resources is increasing. So the costs go down, accessibility goes up, the compellingness of these things increases because they're just able to do more computation, right? And so threat actors also get more practice with them. They learn what they can do, what's effective, and they begin to operationalize certain attack techniques that are effective for them that they can perform over and over again. When I think about like the North Korean attacks where they're getting employed, other people, unfortunately, are like there's a trickle down effect that happens sometimes where nation state threat actors are very creative. They'll come with like a new attack technique. Other people will see that it worked for them and they will copy it. They'll do the same thing. And so those, attack techniques and, they tend to, spread to more and more attackers. And so I think that, if you look to the next few years, you can expect these problems to spread. You can expect more automated at scale social engineering that's AI driven, impersonates people, that's very compelling. Back to the previous topic that we were just discussing, like the human susceptibility of social engineering, like there's no patch for that, right? Humans are going to continue to be, susceptible to this. And so I think that, like a lot of, our efforts in computer security are going to be focused around this stuff in the next, 5 years.
And with that, you're a trendsetter, and people should really pay attention to this episode because they haven't thought about it in as nearly in depth, right? So very, very timely. Okay, with that, we're on to our second to last question, which is from our last leader, Dwayne Labno at Risk Shield. And his cliffhanger for you today is, what's a technique that you use to control your own emotions during critical moments when the world is falling apart? Or I suppose in this case, when you realize you're talking to a deepfake.
Well, I don't know if it'll work in that case, but I think that's we deal with that a lot because we're building these products, and it's like, what do we do when we detect one? Like, you're on a call with this person, right? So I could maybe pop up an alert and tell you that you're talking to one, but most people don't know how to handle that. So often, right, our customers just want, "Oh, just hang the call up, disconnect the call," right? Kick that person off. But, it's an interesting question. It's like, what do you do? So I think, I mean, it's often the situation that, you gotta deal with the world being on fire, like at work and in your personal life. And I I like to practice meditation, specifically, like, trying to, like, not think for short periods of time, because you have this what happens when you get like anxiety is you have this internal dialogue that's going on in your brain, and your brain is the sort of imagining the ways that things could go sideways, that your brain is imagining that this person might be a deep fake. You sort of play out in your head like, well, how is that going to negatively impact me, and am I and so it's that noise in your head that sort of gets you riled up. And so, meditation is potentially a way to quiet that noise. And just sort of like, and I mean, if you go read about like the idea of not thinking, to just empty your mind for a few minutes, and it's very hard to do. It's very hard to do. Your brain, it takes a lot of practice, because your brain will start thinking, and then you realize you're thinking, and you're just like, wait, I'm not supposed to be doing that, right? And so you have to bring yourself back down. So it's hard and requires practice. I always have to have something that's gonna, like, an alarm that's gonna go off, because if I don't, then I become paranoid that it's been a long period of time and I don't know how much time it's been, and I'm thinking about that, and I have to stop that, right? But if you can actually achieve, mental placidity, then, you and quiet all that internal monologue, perhaps that provides you with a moment of relaxation that you can then, come back from, like, emotionally refreshed. So that's my answer to that question.
I agree. And it's funny you say that because when you meditate often, it's more easy to kind of, I call it my daily fishing expedition, reeling your mind back in when it's wandered. And you get better at it so that on the fly, if you're stressed or something happens, you can say, hey, we focus on breathing and not think about anything else. But if you don't meditate often enough, then struggle is real
Yeah, it's hard to remind yourself to get out of your head.
for sure. And with that, now that we have both calmed our minds down, hopefully, after the deepfake scares, what is the one question you would like to ask the next person jumping on as a guest?
So, this is a much more practical question, but like the folks on your podcast are often like they work around security operations, and so I think it's, like back to the discussion we were having, like how do your how does your team, how does your help desk, like, if someone's calling them, how do they know that they're talking to that person? Like, and you can enlarge in that to be, how do you know that anybody you're interacting with on the computer is who they say they are? Because I think that, I mean, we years ago, there was that famous New York Times joke where on the internet, no one knows you're a dog, right? But I think that, like, it is still the case, and increasingly, like, sort of like very quickly becoming compelling in ways that like weren't possible before, that you can, sort of present yourself, as a completely different person. And so, that's, both interesting in some respects, maybe fun in some contexts, but, in a professional context, potentially very scary.
For sure. We'll have to see how the next guest fields this cliffhanger. Okay, Tom, it's been a pleasure. If people would love to learn more about you, reach out to you, how can they find you?
Oh, I mean, so you can find me on LinkedIn by looking for you search for Tom Cross and Get Real, one word, Get Real. It's pretty easy to remember. I'm blogging at getrealsecurity.com. So, check that out.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Great participating in this podcast. I appreciate it.
Thanks to all our guests.